All eyes were on the OAA and West Bloomfield football alums on NFL Draft Weekend, with 5 West Bloomfield Lakers landing on professional rosters. That includes Maxwell Hairston going from the University of Kentucky, going 30th overall, first-round pick to the Buffalo Bills, and as well as a few others signing as undrafted free agents after the draft concluded over the weekend. Donovan Edwards heading to the New York Jets, Makari Page to the Giants, Lance Dixon to the defending champion Philadelphia Eagles, and wide receiver Tyrone Broden from the University of Arkansas going to the Seattle Seahawks. Joining me now to talk about the mass of Laker legends heading into the NFL is former longtime Laker assistant football coach Darryl Bingham. Coach, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you on to talk about this. An exciting time to be a Laker, especially, I would imagine so, for those that were coaching these 5 players during their legendary run at West Bloomfield. You told us earlier on, a few weeks ago as we were leading up to the draft, how proud you were to see your players in a position to go pro. Now that you're seeing 5 of those Lakers landing on professional rosters, what's this moment like for you and for your colleagues?
It's great. I had a chance over the weekend to attend Max's NFL draft party on Saturday. And while we were there, I saw his position coach, Coach Cam. I saw his conditioning coach, Coach Burt, and just seeing his teammates and everything. It was great. It is a feeling that I can only imagine. If I feel this way, how his parents feel. And you're so proud. And the thing about it is, he's still the same kid. He's still the same kid that we had in high school, full of smiles, full of joy, just happy to be around people who love him and happy for the opportunity. And he's very grateful.
And it was such a cool moment, too. And it got a lot of attention on social media. He was selected 30th overall, 29 players going in the first round before him. And after every single one of those players, there was a compilation video of him saluting each of them, dapping them up, shaking their hands, giving them a high five, celebrating them going before him in the draft. Is that just quintessentially who Max is and has been since his days at WB?
That's Max Harrison.
Yeah.
That's Max Harrison 100%. Very authentic, very genuine. He loves to celebrate everyone's victories in life. When you have challenges in life, he's there to support you. Like I said, he's a great football player, but more importantly, he's a better human being. So I'm so proud of the young man and his achievements, and all of them. They have all done a great job. I do have high expectations for all of them. And more importantly, I look to having a very fun-filled fall of visiting different games around the country and watching them play.
Yeah, it's going to be cool to see them playing both in training camp and eventually in the regular season as well, because even the guys that weren't drafted, they landed as undrafted free agents for these Lakers on various teams, a lot of them in the NFC East, landing with teams out east like the Jets and the Eagles. But they're guys that have always been sort of the workhorses, the silent assassins, so to speak, behind the scenes. And really paramount among all of those that really highlights that is Makari Page, a guy that's always sort of been one of the most talented guys in the room. But when you walk into the room, he's not going to be the one showing it to you. He's going to show it to you out on the field. What do you think that brings to an NFL roster that makes him a player that could go from undrafted free agent to impact player on day one?
Makari is a freak of nature when you talk about his athleticism. Yeah. You're talking about a 6'3", safety, once again, very similar to Max, basketball player who really just adapted to just being purely a football player, but more importantly knew how to transition and move his skills from playing other sports over onto the football field. He is a very quiet and soft-spoken person, very, very, very mannerable young man, but very serious on the field. And one of the things I look forward to is, when you have somebody that physical size and the athleticism, what he can bring to a team is remarkable. And Tyler, if you can remember the first state championship that we wound up playing for in that semifinal game, it was because of Makari and his athleticism that actually got us past Cass Tech in that semifinal game. So he brings a whole lot to the table that I think teams could benefit from.
Yeah, and we saw the impact of those players all throughout draft weekend, not just from West Bloomfield, but from schools like Cass Tech and others in Detroit, and all throughout the OAA. Clarkston's Garrett Dellinger becoming the first Clarkston Wolf alum to ever be drafted into the NFL also over the weekend. And that kind of competition certainly helped to elevate these Lakers to the position that they're in now, going pro, and vice versa. For guys that also maybe don't get as much of the praise through Laker lore and even as they're moving on to the NFL, I think of someone like Tyrone Broden, who had a really tough act to follow when he became the primary receiver for the Lakers, both preceding and succeeding him. A.J. Abbott and Taj Mustafa leading the way before him, and then after what arguably the greatest Laker receiver in history in Trey Mosley. But what gets lost in translation there with him is his own talent and ability and his journey along the way too, moving from a couple of different schools in college, learning different systems, having that challenge of adapting. How is that going to help him as he goes into this new challenge trying to make an NFL roster?
Well, you got to remember one unique thing about Rudy. When Rudy left us and he went to college, when he first stopped at Bowling Green, the kid kept growing. By the time he got to Arkansas, he's 6'7". So when you talk about having a target that tall streaking down the field, and when you take a look at what his combine time that he ran at his pro day at his school, the 4.22, you've got a kid that he's going to tell all the D-backs, keep up, catch me if you can, and it's a beautiful target to have someone that height that you can throw to. Once again, another kid, basketball kid who we converted purely to being a football kid. It wasn't out of the desire that he only plays football. It's just one of the things he recognized. His opportunities in life were going to be far greater for him on the football field than being on the basketball court. And he committed himself. He's developed himself. He is, once again, another soft-spoken person. And it's the irony of it all. Most receivers and defensive backs are very cocky. Our young people are very meek, mild manner, and they show up on the field. They do all their talking on the football field. So that's one of the things that I'm very proud of them, is that they won't say much, but their film says everything.
And it's a big moment when you have a Laker great celebrating a big play that they've made on the field. It's a consequential moment. They save those emotions coming out for those sorts of times, and that's why they're being able to really put in that work ethic and get themselves to the next level. Coach Darryl Bingham is with us, a longtime assistant coach with the West Bloomfield Lakers football program, as 5 Lakers now on professional rosters following the 2025 NFL draft weekend. We talked a little bit about Maxwell Hairston, a little bit about Makari Page and Tyrone Broden. A guy that's got a really interesting journey himself is Lance Dixon, a legendary linebacker at West Bloomfield High School, the founding father, I believe, of the Laker jet sweep on the offensive side during the championship era and the early building of this now powerhouse program in southeastern Michigan. He's had sort of a bounce-around journey as well, starting off at Penn State, ending up at West Virginia, ending up at Toledo, and now working his way onto the Philadelphia Eagles roster. But with that winning pedigree and that workhorse mentality, what does he bring to a team that's now coming off a Super Bowl championship?
He's a hybrid. Even though he's played linebacker his whole high school and college career, you could easily move Lance to the safety position. And what you gain is a very hard-hitting person with speed. And typically, you don't have linebackers who have the type of speed that Lance has. With him shifting to the outside linebacker position, he's strong enough that when he played at the collegiate level, he can come down. If he had to set the edge, he can. Pass coverage, he can do it. But like I said, when you take a look at, the versatility that he brings, this is a kid that, you can have him at the outside linebacker position, but you also can have him back at safety. And that's something that is not common. Usually you'll see the linebackers, especially the outside linebackers, they're more hybrids from the standpoint of putting their hand on the dirt on the edge like a Matt Judon, as well as having to drop back into pass coverage. But Lance's ability and his speed gives him the ability to sit back and say, hey, I can play the linebacker position. I'm tough enough to go. If I got to sit back and come down and put my hand in there, I can handle that. But if I need to go back and play safety, nickel, not a problem at all.
Darryl Bingham is with us, a longtime Lakers assistant coach on the football field. 5 Lakers now on professional rosters in the National Football League. Maxwell Hairston with the Buffalo Bills, Donovan Edwards with the New York Jets, Makari Page, New York Giants, Tyrone Broden with the Seattle Seahawks, and Lance Dixon landing with the defending champion Philadelphia Eagles. 4 of those players as undrafted free agents. Max Hairston, 30th overall, first ever first-round pick from West Bloomfield High School out of the University of Kentucky, which had a really good weekend at the NFL draft, and a lot of those players ending up with the Buffalo Bills. Lastly, I want to talk to you about Donovan Edwards, because this is arguably the player that anybody's going to think of as West Bloomfield football. You look back at his days from his junior varsity days and coming up onto the varsity roster early on in his career, people knew this was going to be a star at West Bloomfield, a highly coveted recruit. He goes to the University of Michigan, 5-star recruit, has a great career there, wins a championship, kind of struggles those last couple of years in comparison to those first years, and goes from a guy that people thought may have been a mid-round draft pick, a high-level draft pick, to an undrafted free agent. For the first time really in his career, it seems like Donovan's in a position to play from behind and have to earn his keep even more than he already does naturally. What do you think about Donovan as a football player, as an athlete, as someone with that sort of Laker mentality of a work ethic that sets him up to be able to tackle that challenge and really show off what he had said he wanted to be going into college, one of the greatest running backs in the history of the game?
Let's start. Let's set football and all his athleticism aside, and let's talk about him as a person.
Yeah,
he's a grounded young man who's dealt with a lot of challenges early in life, losing a parent at a very early age, and having to be raised only by his dad and his brother. And he's overcome so much. He's what I call the community kid. He's the kid that has really just adapted to embracing being raised by the community, and more importantly, understands his responsibility to the community at large. Now, we transitioned that into him being an athlete and what he's going to bring coming into sports. Yeah, he had a tough time last year. That was quite evident. He had the injuries that he had to deal with. And then just making that transition that, I think Michigan was dealing with from coming off the national championship and the number of athletes that they lost going into the pros that following year. What I expect from Donovan, if you take a look at the athletes that were drafted at the running back position this year, a lot of them physically aren't the size of Donovan. They're actually a lot smaller in stature. Donovan is a kid also who's a hybrid. You could take Donovan, people forget, this kid has excellent hands. Excellent hands. So if you want to shift him to the slot position, not a problem. He's got great speed, and more importantly, when he's on the field, you've got a kid who has He not only has the knowledge of how to run routes, he not only has the knowledge of how to tote the rock up and down the field, but more importantly, when he played for us as a freshman, Donovan's played quarterback. So you got a kid who academically, breaks down and understands how to break down a defense. So you have a total package here, and as a result, I'm not worried about the kid. He's gonna do well. He's a competitor. He's going to sit back and he's going to compete at the highest level. The biggest thing is, pray to God we keep him healthy.
And you mentioned the character of him, too. That's exactly the kind of guy that people want to have in an NFL locker room, even as a rookie. He's going to develop into a stellar leader at the NFL level. I personally think what sums up his character to me is his signing day at West Bloomfield High School, one of the coldest days we've had in our community in years. Yes. Outdoors, had to be on the football field, A, because of COVID, but B, because of so much national press and local press wanting to be there for that big moment for arguably the greatest recruit we've seen come out of southeastern Michigan in the past decade plus. And with all this national media, all this scheduled time, I tried to arrange an interview with him on our live coverage that day. He couldn't do it. He had a set schedule, but he made his way back out onto the field after he was done for the day. He could have gone home, but he came up to our team at Civic Center TV, made sure he gave his local media their due chance with him as well. And that really just speaks to, as you said, him as a community guy. He's going to come into that locker room on day one and make an impact on his teammates, and that speaks out even more beyond his athleticism. That makes him a perfect fit either in the backfield for the Jets or with a pretty mobile mobile quarterback team in Justin Fields and Tyrod Taylor, whatever gets cooked up by Aaron Glenn and the team out there in New York, he's gonna have a great chance to make a big impact. And it's good to see him too back in a much better set of colors in the green and white after a few years in maize and blue. Definitely warms my Spartan and Laker heart here as well. Coach, we've seen the Lakers renaissance over the past 15, 20 years under Ron Bellamy, Tyrese Grice, now Zach Hilbers, and all the assistants that went into that. You mentioned earlier on Coach Cam, Coach Dickerson having a very proud weekend with Maxwell Hairston, Makari Page, others he's coached like Will Johnson, all ending up on NFL rosters. But when you bring it back to the program, what about this West Bloomfield program do you think sets these kids up to make the most of the opportunities that are in front of them and now be able to catapult a handful of Lakers in 1 year onto NFL rosters?
Take a look at the young people that all got drafted and from that time frame. They are the individuals who built the legacy of West Bloomfield football. So they understood the hard work that it was going to take to go from being the doormat in the OAA to actually being the dominant player in the OAA with the target on their back every year. So, they have that, they carry that mentality and that swag. It's not about walking through the door. It's about kicking the door open and owning your time and your space. So as a result of that, their transition going into professional football to me is nothing more than a natural matriculation of the work that they put in their whole time period, coming out of youth sports, coming to us at the high school level, going to the various colleges that they played at, and now their talent being recognized as being worthy enough to play at the pro level.
And as the younger players that are now in the West Bloomfield Laker program, those varsity players looking for that opportunity at the collegiate level, dreaming of getting into the NFL, being drafted one day themselves, as they look at these 5 players collectively, what do you think is the strongest example that they've set that these players that are currently in the program should take to heart themselves and implement as they train and as they compete over the next up to 4 years at West Bloomfield?
One of the things that I love about our players when they come back is they reiterate a lot of the things that we tell the kids, and it goes without us even having to coach them and saying this. They understand this purely. And they tell the kids, you inherited a legacy. It is your job to protect it. You have people who have reverence for you because of the work that came before you, but it is your job to go out there and to maintain the integrity of that reverence and that legacy that was set up before you. So as a result, it puts a certain responsibility on the backs of the players to make sure that they understand, don't let the former players down by letting yourselves down, by not achieving what you're capable of achieving. Be perfect in your effort, or in other words, do your best at all times. And as a result of that, they will also have the opportunities to basically inherit some of the future growth and future opportunities that our former players have actually laid down for them now at the professional level.
Yeah, Coach B, I think the Lakers are going to need to start making some plans, Eric Pierce and the team, for a new flagpole out at the Swamp, because Matthew Judon's 99. I don't think that's going to be the lone Laker number retired there for very long. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.